I've seen things you people wouldn't believe.
Blade Runner didn't end the way it was meant to end. It was made to end that way by executives who didn't trust ambiguity. They didn't just trim scenes. They forced a different emotion onto the final minutes of a film designed to leave you unsettled. And once you see what the forbidden ending implies, you'll realize something uncomfortable. You've been watching two different movies depending on which version you got. The wild part? The forced ending didn't just change the vibe. It changed what the entire movie is about. We're going to break this down into 5 moves that fundamentally altered Blade Runner's ending. Stay until the end, because that last piece explains why fans still fight over this movie 40 years after its release. And yes, one of those changes wasn't even shot for Blade Runner. The ending the movie wanted. Blade Runner isn't an action story. It never was. Strip away the flying cars and the neon rain and what remains is a haunting. The movie operates like a fever. Dream where every question breeds 3 more questions. Where certainty dissolves the moment you reach for it. Where you leave the theater not satisfied, but infected with something you can't name. Ridley Scott's version works best when it refuses to reassure you. The ending he designed carried no safety net, no reassurance, just a question mark lingering in the dark like smoke that refuses to clear. Roy Batty delivers his final monologue about tears and rain. He dies, and then we're left with Deckard, a man who has spent the entire film hunting beings that might be more human than he is. The original vision ends with that weight pressing down on the audience. No escape, no relief, just the echo of mortality in a world that treats life as disposable. This world isn't built for happy closure. Every frame drips with existential dread. The architecture crushes downward. The rain never stops. The advertisements promise off-world colonies that most people will never reach. This is a universe designed to make you feel small and temporary. And the ending was supposed to honor that design by refusing to comfort you. So why would a studio look at something this deliberately crafted and say no? Why would they demand comfort in a story built on dread? Because studios don't sell haunting. They sell relief. The ending, the studio forced. The studio looked at early audience reactions and panicked. Audiences weren't sure how to feel when the credits rolled. They weren't walking out satisfied. They were walking out confused. And in Hollywood mathematics, confusion equals box office poison. The studio wanted one thing above all else: clarity. They wanted audiences to leave the theater thinking, okay, I understand what I just watched. That nice man got away with the pretty girl. The bad things are over. I can go home and sleep without questions keeping me awake. But Blade Runner isn't supposed to be understood cleanly. It's supposed to echo. It's supposed to follow you home and whisper. Questions at 3 in the morning. The forced ending betrays that fundamental design. What did the studio add? Sunlight, green trees, open roads stretching toward a horizon that promises escape. They stitched in bright escape imagery that didn't belong in this world, using aerial footage originally shot for The Shining. Think about that for a second. Horror movie footage, repurposed as a happy ending. Deckard and Rachael drive away into mountains and forests that shouldn't exist in this universe. The perpetual rain stops. The crushing city vanishes. Suddenly, we're in a different movie entirely. A movie where hope is possible. A movie that contradicts everything the previous 2 hours established. The forced ending isn't just a different scene. It's a different contract with the viewer. One version says, life is fragile and the world is indifferent, and you must find meaning in the brief moments you're given. The other version says, don't worry, everything will be okay. Love conquers all. Even in a world built on exploitation and death, 2 pretty people can drive into the sunset. Do you prefer a movie that haunts you or a movie that resolves you? Think about that, because your answer reveals what kind of storytelling you actually want in your life. And to make that forced ending work, to smooth over the tonal whiplash of jamming hope into a hopeless world, the studio added another tool, a voice that tells you exactly what to feel. The narration, the studio's safety rail. Narration is not neutral, it's control. Every word of voiceover is the movie telling you what to think instead of letting you think for yourself. Harrison Ford recorded the narration under protest. He's spoken openly about hating every minute of it, and it plays like it. The studio demanded narration because test audiences needed things explained. They needed the movie to hold their hand through the ambiguity that made Blade Runner powerful in the first place. They needed someone to tell them it was okay to feel uncertain. Watch the theatrical cut and you'll hear Deckard explain his feelings. You'll hear him describe what he sees. You'll hear him interpret events that the visual storytelling already communicated perfectly. Notice what the voiceover is really doing. It's removing your permission to interpret. Every time the narration kicks in, the movie stops trusting you. Blade Runner is at its best when it assumes intelligence on the part of its audience. The sets tell you everything about this society. The performances communicate emotion without spelling it out. The silence between characters says more than any exposition dump ever could. Narration destroys that silence. It fills the spaces where your imagination was supposed to live. When you feel mystery, narration turns it into explanation. When you feel unease, narration turns it into comfort. When you feel the weight of questions without answers, narration rushes in to provide answers nobody asked for. And once the studio starts explaining, once they establish that this movie needs a safety rail, the biggest question in the entire film becomes a battleground. Because Blade Runner has one question the studio couldn't control, no matter how hard they tried. The cuts that changed the big question. Is Deckard a replicant? That question has fueled arguments for 4 decades. Books have been written about it. University courses analyze it. Ridley Scott has given contradictory interviews about it. Harrison Ford disagrees with the director about it. And here's the truth nobody wants to accept. The answer changes depending on which version of the film you watch. There is no definitive answer because the film itself refuses to be definitive. Different cuts don't just change scenes, they change the answer. The theatrical version leans toward Deckard being human. The director's cut and final cut lean toward Deckard being a replicant. Tiny editorial choices determine whether a moment reads as a clue or a coincidence, a dream sequence, a unicorn, a knowing look from another character. These elements either exist prominently or don't exist at all depending on the version. That's why people still argue about this movie. Not because they're confused, because the film genuinely exists in multiple realities. You can watch one version and walk away certain of your interpretation, then watch another version and have that certainty completely dismantled. The movie changes depending on which cut you experience first. The studio wanted clarity. They wanted audiences to know who Deckard was. But the movie itself resists that clarity. It's designed to resist. Every time the studio tried to pin down an answer, the ambiguity leaked through in some other form. The ending wasn't ruined. It was redirected. Different versions point toward different destinations. And that multiplicity of meaning is exactly what makes Blade Runner inexhaustible, even after all these years. Now here's the paradox that nobody expected. That studio interference, those compromises, those forced changes that violated the director's vision, they might be the reason Blade Runner became immortal. The wrong ending created the legend. A clean ending ends discussion. You watch the movie. You understand it. You move on. But an imperfect ending creates obsession. When fans sense something is off, when they feel tension between what they saw and what they expected, they dig deeper. They rewatch. They analyze frame by frame. They debate online for decades. They recruit new viewers into the obsession. They keep the conversation alive long after other films have been forgotten. Blade Runner underperformed on release, especially next to E.T., and it took time to become the legend we talk about now. The theatrical cut confused mainstream audiences and disappointed cinephiles who sensed something was wrong. Critics were mixed. The movie should have disappeared into the bargain bin of history alongside 1,000 other forgotten science fiction films. Instead, it became one of the most influential science fiction films ever made because people couldn't stop talking about it. The flaws created friction. The multiple versions created mysteries that demanded investigation. The studio interference created martyrdom for the director's true vision. Every compromise became fuel for the cult. Perfect movies get liked. Messy masterpieces get worshipped. Blade Runner earned its status not despite the studio meddling, but partially because of it. The struggle between art and commerce became part of the legend itself. The existence of multiple cuts transformed a single film into an archaeological dig that fans could excavate forever. Blade Runner didn't become iconic because it was smooth and polished. It became iconic because it was contested. The forbidden ending isn't about plot, it's about permission. It's the movie refusing to comfort you, refusing to reassure you, refusing to tell you what to believe. About Deckard, about humanity, about whether any of this matters in a universe that treats consciousness as a manufacturing defect. That's why the studio couldn't allow it, because it leaves the audience holding the weight. It demands that you find meaning instead of having meaning delivered on a platter. It trusts you to sit with discomfort. It believes you can handle ambiguity without a safety net. And studios in 1982 didn't trust audiences with anything. They assumed you needed protection from your own thoughts. The forbidden ending is the ending that lets ambiguity breathe. The forced ending turns ambiguity into reassurance. One trusts you to carry the weight, the other assumes you can't handle it. If you want the next link in this chain, how Blade Runner's DNA shaped modern science fiction from Ex Machina to Westworld to Her, I've got that video on screen right now. Which ending is real to you? Theatrical or final cut? Drop one word in the comments. No. Explanations. Just pick a side.